Hey everybody, it's Kathryn with Pollinate Ritual, and I want to welcome you to our spoken word with Yael Wolfe. We're here today to talk a little bit about rest, which is of course our theme for January 2022. And you're really lucky because you're going to see like the insides of both Yael and I today. Full disclosure, Yael and I are very close friends, so
This could
it
go
might
off the
get a little
rails.
wonky. Might see like the other side of the veil. Uh, but anyway, we're glad to have you here. We're glad to, if you like what you see, please join us. We're going to be doing these every month with writers from the Pollinate Magazine world and maybe some other people as well. And please check out the series that we're going to be having on rest in Pollinate Magazine, which you can find at medium.com/Pollinate Magazine. We've got a great lineup, including Yael this week coming up. So we'll have 6 writers that are giving us all their thoughts on rest, how we rest, why we don't, and all those things. And we're going to be covering some of that today. I don't know, do you want me to give you an intro? I feel like it's better just to talk about you instead of me giving an intro. So usually what I do with the spoken word is I always start off every spoken word with a question for our authors. And the question is, why do you write? So let's start there.
All right. So this goes back to my childhood. It's so hard for me to answer that because I'm one of those people who I knew my mission from the beginning. And so it's always been a part of me. It's like there is no why other than like, why do you breathe? Right. It's like, I just do.
Yes.
I think I started when I was in 2nd grade, and I was just hooked in that moment, and it was like, oh, and by the time I was 10, I knew like, I am going to be a writer. I'm going to be a novelist. That was my particular thing at the time, which I still wanted to be. And I started a practice at that point. My parents bought a typewriter for themselves and I borrowed it constantly. This was 1986. And so I remember thinking, if I want to be good at this, I have to do it all the time. And so I would just start. I'm 10 years old and I'm just writing all the time. And it never ended. I started collecting notebooks in my teen years because again, it was the 80s and 90s and we had one computer at home that we all shared. So I didn't have access to like a word processor that was private. So I would just by longhand, I would write out novel after novel after, I use that term loosely for a teenager, right. But that's all I did. Like people said, do you want to go out to the dance tonight? Do you want to go bowling? Do you want to go ice skating? No, I'm writing.
Yeah.
So I just never stopped. And it was just such an inherent part of who I was. Yeah.
What does it feel like? But I'm talking like both emotionally and also physically. What does it feel like when you're in the active state of writing?
There are kind of 2 phases. One of them is pretty rare for me, thankfully. It's when I feel a little bit blocked, and every artist knows this feeling. Natalie Goldberg beautifully described it as, and sorry, it's a little graphic, but she said like cutting into a vein and having cornflakes come out instead of blood. It's like, yeah, that's how that feels. But like I said, it's pretty rare for me to feel that way because usually if I sit down and try, something will come up. Mm-hmm. And when I'm in that space, there's, a varying spectrum. I don't mean to imply that it's like glorious every time, but it feels good all the time, just somewhere on that spectrum. Sometimes it is glorious. Sometimes it's just like, this feels really good. And it's just like a feeling of like a river, like being a river, and just that water is carrying you. I don't map out things that I write typically, except for novels, because there's such, the long form really requires that. Mm-hmm. But for articles and poems and things like that, I just sit down and I let the writing take me where it wants to go. And so I never know what it's going to turn out to be. I never, like on occasion, I'll have bullet points that I want to touch on, but that's it. And so by the time I get to the end, I'm like, oh, that was awesome. That was a great ride. It doesn't always mean that I'm happy with the end result. I'm not always that happy with it, but it feels really good to watch it because it will construct itself. It just comes through you.
Yeah, it's this beautiful channeling. It's like a zone experience, you
Yeah.
know. I mean, when I'm in the zone, when I'm in my writing space and it's
Mhm.
really on, I mean, sometimes when it's not on, it can be excruciating, honestly,
Yes.
but when
Yeah.
it's on, I can't think of one other activity that I participate in that makes me feel so connected to
Yeah.
myself,
Oh, yeah. Oh,
right?
that's
Like
that's a good way to
connected
describe
to
it.
myself, connected to divine source. Like
Mhm.
it feels amazing. And when
Yeah.
you do get that piece that actually comes super easy and is
Mhm.
actually really good,
Yeah.
right? I have one piece that I wrote about my time in Ireland,
Mhm.
and it's about love and learning to love after loss. And I still remember writing that piece and how
Mm.
amazingly beautiful it felt. And when I was
Yeah.
done, and it's still probably my favorite piece,
Mhm.
you know. So
Yeah.
yeah, I love that. I love that feeling. Tell us a little bit about your emergence on Medium and what why, because that's where I met you, was on
Mhm.
Medium. And so tell me a little bit about how you found that platform and why you invested so heavily in it, um, and why you think it invested so heavily back in you.
I remember, so this was in the early days of freelancing. So there are some aspects of my memory that are a little cloudy because that was a really hard time for me trying to figure out how to really leverage my talents and monetize them, honestly, because I had left my job earlier than I expected to. And it was a really, yeah, I was experiencing a lot of anxiety. And there were two things that I was chasing. And one of them was just like your typical journalistic stuff where, the pay is good, you do articles, but the hustle is brutal, just go, 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 pitching constantly. And I was hitting the wall a lot with that. Then there was this other side of me, this, my artistic side, and the side that really wanted to explore sexuality and feminism and all of those things that I had never truly experimented with before. Like I have dipped my toes into this many times in my past work. And there was some voice inside me saying, you really need to go at this, like really go all out. And I started thinking about ideas for it, what I might do, and eventually landed on, well, just write about your experience. Just see if you can try that. And I don't remember how I found Medium, but I remember getting on there and realizing, oh my God, like even if I only make $5 from this, this is the first time I found a place that pays you to write, just like whatever, like you write, they'll pay you. And so I thought, well, I'll just give it a try. And I think I'd only written maybe 5 or 6 articles and I was only writing about sex at the time. And
Yes,
then,
Yael writes a lot about sex.
yes, I definitely did back then. And I remember Ben Davis from Sexography contacted me and he was like,
Which is a
hey,
publication on Medium. It's a
yes.
larger publication on Medium.
And so he asked, would you like to be a columnist? Like, we really like your writing. And I was so thrilled because I couldn't, like 6 or 7 articles in, like somebody asked me that. And it was really exciting. And so that just opened up a whole venue for creative expression and building community. Like, I feel like we partnered really well and helped each other build our audiences. And it was just a beautiful experience. And I think that's really where it all began.
So before we get into the rest stuff, tell us a little bit about Howl, which is the column that you started at Sexography, and now you're taking into a brand new space
Yeah.
of your own and kind of taking it in a little bit of a different direction. Tell us a bit about that.
So I am relaunching it and creating it in a temple space, as I call it, on my
Mm.
website from now on. I really feel like I experienced the hardships that I experienced with the column were things that I didn't expect to happen, which I probably should have, but having unwanted attention and not feeling safe around it and that sort of thing. And it caused me to pull back very heavily. And then it just went into hiatus for a whole year. And really, though, I'm glad of that because it gave me time to truly discover exactly what I wanted to do with it and how I wanted to pivot it and direct where it was going. And one of the things that I realized was that there was a piece missing from it. So there was the sexuality part, and the howl, is an allusion to the poem Howl by Allen Ginsberg, but also obviously it's meant to illustrate like the idea of a woman's voice, a woman's pleasure, a woman connecting with her tribe, all of those things. But then I remembered there's also howling in anger, and that women have been disconnected from their sexuality, and they've also been disconnected from their anger. And I really thought about how empowering it would be to really marry these two ideas and find ways to put ourselves back together as a whole, complete people. Mm-hmm. And so that's something that I want to explore in the writing. And I've created this space on my website where, you'll buy into the subscription. And in that way, I feel like it asks for more of a sacred attention instead of just being out in the world where anyone could do whatever they want with it and come at me as if this is, this is saying, okay, this is like a sacred space. If you want to come in and enjoy it, go ahead. Like whatever your gender you are, it doesn't matter. But, realize like you give a tithing to the goddess. You can come in and then behave well.
I think that's really interesting because I think a lot of women writers that are exploring sexual topics within their writing, unfortunately, they do have to be cognizant of the fact that, people might come into that space with a different agenda than maybe what you intended with the writing, So I think it's a great idea to create some expectations around behaviors
exactly
within that space, and that's beautiful. And also, I think one of the really beautiful things about your work is that, of course, it has the photography piece intertwined with the work. And as amazing of a writer as you are, like you're also an amazing photographer and artist. And I think all of the work that you've done around exploring your body, exploring body positivity, both inside of the sexual realm and outside of the sexual realm, have been really, that journey has been so much more, what's the word I'm looking for? Visceral because of the photography, right? That is accompanied it. So tell me a little bit about why the photography and what role it plays as being the counterpart to the writing.
This is something that I, as I'm writing this stuff, part of my issue with the way that we approach sexuality in this culture is that it's not accessible to everyone. It's like you have to be a certain age, a certain weight, a certain body type, a certain skin color, all of these things. And you see that reflected in the imagery of it and the way that we talk about it and the way that we put it in media. And this has been a constant frustration. And I know other sex writers feel this way. When you go into stock photography sites and you put in something like sensual woman or something like that to, find a picture for your article, everything is what I just described, like a 22-year-old white woman who weighs 110 pounds in a push-up bra on, a bed like this. And I'm like, I want to talk about inclusive sexuality. I want women to be able to walk into that space.
And conversely, real quick, the men are always hard-bodied,
yes,
ripped, like, they've got the perfect beard and the perfect haircut, and it's just like the Barbie dolls.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so I want women to be able to walk into this space and see themselves in it to be like, oh, it doesn't matter what you weigh. It doesn't matter if you are in your 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. I don't care. Whatever your ethnicity is, I want women to be able to see themselves in this space so that they know I can walk it. I don't have to look like that image. I don't have to be that person. I don't have to strive for that. And as I was going through my photography, like the exploration of self-portraiture, I was realizing like, that's really what I'm asserting here is my desire to see myself in this space. And I also really loved the way that because it's different, it's like, I don't want stock photography for everything. I don't want everything to look perfect. And, what I do is just my imperfect body and my imperfect art, and so I want to create this and pair it with my words and make it personal and personal, like image personal, words personal, everything is me.
Mhm.
And so as I'm going through this, it's been a real blessing to create this space on my website, because there's a lot of stuff I can't use or won't use on Medium or in public places like that, partly because of all the censorship that goes on around women's breasts, and partly because
There's a lot if you don't know people.
oh yeah. And like, I get like Medium is a target for bots coming in and stealing work all the time, and they take everything, the photographs, everything. And so I don't want my photographs. I mean, people are going to steal it anyways, but I don't want the bots coming in and taking that. And so I can have this space now where I can put a picture of myself with my boobs out. Not that it's like, it's not about that. It's just like,
Yeah.
this is a self-portrait. I happen to be completely naked in this, but I can put it out there because I'm not going to get censored, and it's not going to be stolen by the bots. And it feels safe to me. And then it will literally like to me, it enhances the words that I'm saying. It really brings it home. And so it makes me feel so empowered to have that space where I can own everything.
Right. Wonderful. One of the things I love about the photography too is I've always been struck by, there's this sense of transparency in the actual imagery, right? It's very like layered, it's very wispy ghosty almost, like the way that you the way you take the photos and the way you present them later, it's like it's always kind of calling us into our inner space, right? Our deeper selves. And what is that like kind of shadow self or aura self that we always carry with us and we keep hidden, right? That should be out in the world, or could be out in the world, or wants to be out in the world. And I feel that a lot with your photography, is like we're getting to see, with the writing especially, like we're getting to see that shadow self that just wants to get out and do the thing, right? And be the person and be who they are and not apologize for it or explain it or all the things, right? It's just like, no, I'm here, I'm present, and accounted for, right? So if you want to look for Yael's work, you can go to yaelwolfe.com, right? Super easy. And Yael is spelled Yael, and Wolf is spelled with an E at the end. Okay, so go check it out. I think the Howl Temple is going to be up in a couple weeks. So that'll be exciting too. And Yael works with Pollinate quite frequently, so you can also check out some of her work through the magazine every once in a while. So, all right, let's get into the rest. The rest. Wow, it's such a huge subject.
Yeah.
It's such a huge subject in general, right? Which most of our topics are, let's be honest.
Yeah.
We pick broad topics for a reason, right? But they're also, the reason that they are broad is because they're so significant to every human soul, right? And rest is one of those things. And it's funny because when we decided on rest at the magazine, we decided on it quite a long time ago, I feel like. And sometimes our themes are guided by the dialogue that's happening out in the world. But one of the things I was struck by with rest was like we decided on it, and then it seemed like as we started approaching this month, I just started seeing a ton of pieces being written about rest
Mm.
and you know what's going on in the world around this issue. So it kind of like it's like one of those things where you feel like, oh, we're all tapped in at the
Mm-hmm.
same time to
Oh,
a
yeah.
topic. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's really, really exciting when I see that, like, when we are aligned with lots of other people talking about rest, I'm like, yeah, this is a big thing in the
Yep.
world. So tell me about your relationship with rest right now in your
Okay.
life.
This is so tough because I feel like I'm really finally starting to extrapolate important information that I need to have and implement in my life, but it's very difficult to do because the brainwashing is so intense, you know? So that this is part of what I've written about for Pollinate, that my adult life has taken, taken me over the course of, jobs that are in particular industries where hard work and like exhaustive hard work is kind of the norm. There's a lot of industries like this, and I'd argue all of them are, honestly, like in our culture, like everything
Yeah.
that we do is anti-rest basically. But there are certain particular industries that are really, I think, pretty abusive about it. And two of those are education and nonprofits. And I've worked in those. And I don't mean that like across the board, but I mean that tends to be the trend.
Yeah.
And so those are how I have lived my adult life, in that mentality of like, you just work, work, work. And in those specific industries, there's also the additional challenge of you should do that and feel good about it and make like a moral investment in that by eschewing the fact that you're going to, need or want a larger salary. Like you should be happy
Well,
with a
yeah,
little
and I
thing.
think like what's interesting about that dynamic is that, those things are chronically underfunded. And
Yes.
the only way that they're actually those parts of our culture and society are supported is by the people who are doing it because they care.
Yes.
And for some reason, that's become normalized. Like,
Yes.
we'll enslave the people who actually care about these things instead of
Yes.
funding it to the level that it needs to be,
Right.
right? So
Mm-hmm.
that people don't need to be making these type of compromises.
Mm-hmm.
Because you talk very clearly in the article about, you're talking about real health compromises here.
Yes.
This isn't just
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, I don't get to spend too much time with my kids, which is a big deal too.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I mean, people are literally like working themselves into the grave at this point under
Yes.
under this model.
Mm-hmm. And that's really where the realizations for me started, which was in 2015 when I started working in nonprofit for the first time. And I was so overwhelmed. I'd never, ever been in a situation like that before. The amount of work that they gave me, it was like more than one job. And I remember having panic attacks constantly. Like, even I'd go out on my walk. My walk is my sacred mental health space. Like, you can't rattle me on my walk
I can
for the
attest to
most
that,
part.
people. It is.
Yeah. We talk during that time, and like it was astounding to me that I would go, half a mile and I'd have to stop because I'd had a panic attack, and then I'd start going again, and then I'd have another panic attack. And I remember thinking, what is happening to me? And I remember months into the job, I started being able to, I could feel when my cortisol levels were about to spike. It was like that tuned in I became, because it was happening all the time. And I'm like, oh God, here we go, here we go. And it was like, and I I began getting all these mystery symptoms, severe fatigue, severe pain issues. I was going to the doctor all the time. I was going to my acupuncturist all the time. Thank God I had at least good health insurance. And everything was like, what's wrong with me? Nobody could figure out what was wrong with me. And I remember, like, maybe 2 years in, I kept hearing this voice saying, you are developing a disease. Like, you are going to die from the stress of this job. And I kept saying, that's ridiculous. Everybody works hard. Like, this is normal. This is the way life is supposed to be. But also there was this other part of me that kept pushing back against that and saying, no, I think this is true. And I'd go and talk to my boss about it. And she'd say, there is nothing wrong with working on the weekends. You should be glad for all the work or for all the things that you're doing for the community, and just come in and work on the weekends. A good person works. I work on the weekends. Everybody should work. And so we just went on and on like this. And I literally hit a wall. Like, that's why I ended up freelancing before I was ready, because I couldn't do it anymore. And I mean, I was just literally sick to the point where like the pain was so bad, I could not walk around with a stack of books. Like, I remember picking up books and I'm like, I can't do this. I'm in so much pain right now. And it just became this, for the last few years while I've been freelancing, I have been trying to untangle this, because that mentality has carried forward with me. Like, I brought it with me because I have been so brainwashed by it. And so I went into freelancing and everything was this feeling of, I shouldn't be enjoying my work. I shouldn't be resting. I shouldn't, like, even working from home or getting up when it, like, following my own circadian rhythms, that feels so subversive to me that it's like, I'm scared I'm going to get in trouble. Like, I literally felt like I was scared that like someone would call the police or something and be like, this woman is not towing the line, like, take her back to school or something. And I had to, like, just that part alone, I had to fight so hard for the first year or so of freelancing. And then I started realizing, okay, it is okay for me to do things that I enjoy. It is okay for me to follow my own rhythms. I don't have to show up at a cubicle at 6 a.m. anymore. I don't have to. I can choose something different. But I still struggle with just the balance of rest and work, because I will, now that I'm freelancing, I really can work whenever I want in comfortable ways. Like, I'm in bed right now, which was symbolic of our talk, but like, I can sit in my bed and work. And then it becomes that line of like, okay, wait a minute, just because I'm home and can be comfortable, this isn't really resting if I'm working. And am I really, like, am I doing something right by doing this? Or is this the imbalance and the brainwashing of the whole, like, keep going. And because I still haven't healed from the health issues completely. And so it's like, okay, I am not done with this journey yet.
Yeah. And I think what's like so exciting right now is that so many people are opening up to this awakening, right? Where, we're in the midst of the great resignation, as it's being called, which is, I think, don't quote me on the number, but I think it's like 4 million people are like actively like resigned from their jobs. And it's kind of sent our economy and the whole system into chaos at the moment. Which I'm super excited about, because I do think that the pandemic gave us an opportunity to do some reset on a lot of things. And what nobody really anticipated is what the imposed rest of the pandemic caused for us, what type of like impact that was going to have on the human soul. And because we've all been grinding so hard for so long, and it's just become so normalized, right? Like, there's, as you pointed out, there's so much shame around like, not grinding, not participating in the, this kind of mentality. I mean, I don't, I'm going to use this word lightly, because I know that it has a lot of connotations to cultural perspectives, but in some ways it feels like an enslavement, a mental enslavement, right? Like, you just can't break free from this like ongoing connection you have with productivity in this culture, right?
Yes.
And that there are, there is no expendable limit when it comes to that. I mean, when you look at our country's history, right, and that there were people that were willing to enslave other human beings for the cause of productivity and money, like, that space has never really been cleaned up, and all the levels that it's not been cleaned up. It hasn't been cleaned up culturally. It hasn't been cleaned up politically. And it also hasn't been cleaned up spiritually, emotionally, and mentally for everybody in this culture, right? We're still saying like, yes, it's okay to sacrifice our bodies. It's okay to sacrifice our souls, our families, our children's futures, their mental stability. Like all of these things are totally 100% okay to sacrifice as long as somebody else is making money because of it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. As long as somebody else is making money. Yeah.
Right. Because we're not making the money.
Right. Exactly.
And then conversely, it also that system then gives a small amount of people the freedom to have all those things in life, right? To have a nap, have food security, to have education, to be able to work and do something that they absolutely love to do, as opposed to something they have to do to feed themselves and their families, So it is like really super deep ruts, but I feel like, there is a nonviolent revolution happening right now around this, right? And I think part of it was the pandemic, but also part of it has been like, listen, a lot of us got kicked out of the 25-year job with benefits model and kicked into the gig world to begin with, right? Like, I chose to live the freelance lifestyle back in the day, right? Back when Free Agent Nation was coming out at the end of the 90s. And Fast Company Magazine. That was like my Bible at the time. I was like, oh my God, you mean I don't have to go to work for the man?
Yeah.
And like all these, like, maybe these big revolutions that happen in our world, it starts off with all the best intentions, right? Like really talking about, at that time, they were really talking about completely changing the world of work, right?
Yep.
And that beautiful hope that we would all be able to have more balanced lives and have more control over our worlds and our lives got kind of perverted in the capitalist, gaze, if you will, and came like, yeah, there's no off button here.
Yep.
There's no going home. There's no vacation. There's no sick leave. Like you got to just work all the time because you're a gig worker, and we don't have any kind of safety net for you. And of course, hello, Mr. Jobs, right?
Yeah.
The thing that just allowed us to, always be on, right? And how it's so hard to release from that. But I think we are seeing a lot of people do it. And so how are you fighting the battle? Like, what are the things that you're just committing to for yourself that like, hey, you know what? This is my rebellion. I call them rebellion naps. And of course, the nap ministry. If you've ever checked out the nap ministry,
I'm
you should.
obsessed with them. Yeah.
They've been preaching this from the BIPOC space for a really, really long time, as rest being the revolution, being the rebellion, being the fuck you to the patriarchy, to the white supremacist patriarchy, like all of those things. And I think it's resonated a lot with everyone, that messaging, because we all are in this space at different levels and with different experiences. But so if you haven't checked out Nap Ministry, check it out. But yeah, how are you claiming this space back?
One thing is definitely, as you mentioned, how the pandemic really shifted our views on this. And so that was like the first moment for me was like, I'm tired in the afternoons. And here I am on lockdown, quarantine, can't go anywhere, can't see. This is obviously early days of the pandemic. And I'm like, why can't I take a nap? Nobody's even going to know. And it had to be that level of permission for me at the time to do that, because it felt so
something had to really crazy be happening, like a pandemic shutdown, for you to like give yourself a nap.
Isn't that sad?
Yeah,
God,
it is sad, but it's true. You weren't the only one.
Oh yeah. And I did that for months in those early days when, we weren't going anywhere at all. And then after that started shifting, I'm like, I'm still tired in the afternoons and nothing's going to change that. And I'm like, what if I just kept doing this? And so almost every day I will take like a 10 to 30 minute nap in the afternoons. And it is the joy of my life. It is so, I can't even describe how wonderful it is to just sink into my pillows. And I'll usually watch like an ASMR video or a relaxation meditation video. And it's like listening to someone's voice in the background. And I'm just like, I literally feel like I'm just sinking into the bed. And it's so beautiful and wonderful. And I mean, honestly, there is still a level of guilt and shame I feel about it. Like I don't walk around going, well, I take a nap every day. I mean, I
I
don't
do.
literally. Good. We should say that and we should promote that. But it's like, there's still this little part of me that's like, oh, I'm not supposed to do that, you know? But like today I was thinking about that because I thought, oh, I'm booked all day today with visits with family and stuff like that. And I'm like, damn, I'm not going to get my nap today. You know, it's like all of a sudden I'm like, oh yeah, this is a really big part of my life now. And I'm glad of that. I need it. And so,
go ahead.
did you want to?
No, I was going to say, I think that this is like really plays into something else you talked about in your article, which is like, you know, ultimately this is all getting down to a self-worth issue.
Yes.
You know, like,
Totally.
you know, we're, you know, a lot of us are coming to grips with our lack of self-worth, our lack of self-love, our over commitment to self-loathing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think, yeah, this is kind of a big pivot, big deal.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
To put
Absolutely.
those two things together. Like how does a nap support my self-worth?
Yeah.
How does me saying, no, I don't respond to emails on the weekends?
Yes.
Or
Oh my
no,
God,
I'm not going to turn around your text message in 5 minutes.
mm-hmm.
You know, or no, I'm not going to have my phone with me while I'm sleeping.
Yeah.
Or, you know, all these ways that we can kind of like step back into a rest space.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like, because
Yes.
the expectations have changed
Mm-hmm.
with the phone, right? Like,
Oh my God, yes.
it's really like taking it up a notch where, you know, the expectation of accessibility
Mm-hmm.
is unreal.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You know, so it feels like, you know, it's really hard to step away from, you know, taking care of other people's needs so you can take
Mm-hmm.
care of your own needs, which
Uh-huh.
is a self-worth issue, isn't it?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
So tell me, I want to talk a little bit. This is where we might go into TMI, but one of the things that I love about your rest regimen that I've seen in our friendship, and you've also done some beautiful photography around, is the bath.
Yes. I was
Is the
just going to
bath.
bring that up too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, and of course, I have a shit bathtub in my
So do
house.
I. Mine is
And
terrible.
I love to take baths, but I just can't because it's so uncomfortable in my bathtub.
Oh,
It's not a comfortable space.
yeah.
And so I don't really take baths here. When I go traveling, I always book in a place that has a bathtub,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
right? But tell me a little bit about the role of baths in your life in terms of rest.
Oh God, I love them. To be honest, I don't I don't do them that much because, you know, so basically I like to clean out the tub before I do it, even if I just cleaned it out a couple days ago, just so it's like nice and fresh. And that alone will deter me. 'Cause I hate cleaning the
I feel you
bathtub.
on that. Yeah.
But when I do, like, I really try to encourage myself. You know, you always say this thing to me, you know, being a Cancer, you're like, water is your healing agent. And I always think of that. I'm like, yeah, it really is. And another thing is timing as well, because I don't like to, I usually take a shower in the mornings. And so I don't like to be like, oh, I'm going to take a bath in the morning. What is that? But I started challenging that over the past year. And now I'm like, well, this is when I would take a shower. So I'm just going to extend that time and take a bath instead. You know what I mean? So it's like, why not? And part of the thing that I love about it is just, I love being in the water. I love the feeling of it. And I literally, like, it's something about it makes me really engage in a lot of self-soothing behavior. It's very strange. It's like, I will do this because I like the water to move over me. And
Right.
so I want to feel it. And so it's like, I don't
Oh,
have jets, so I'm just going to make it happen by swaying. And then it's like,
love
oh,
that.
nice. And then I cannot not stroke myself. Like I feel so good in the water. And then I just have to feel my skin and how pretty it looks. And then Should I go into the TMI?
Go there, girl. Come on.
Okay, so
let's give them something to really get into.
this is also probably going to sound really weird, but I love the way my body hair looks and feels in the water. And so particularly, like, you know, your hand is long enough to reach to your crotch. And so I will just like pet that hair. And it's like, it just feels so good to me. And again, it's just this weird self-soothing thing that I'm just like, and it's not a sexual thing. I mean, it can turn into that, but usually for me, it's just like, I just love feeling my body.
Yeah.
And in that space, it just makes me feel at home and nourished and like I'm being revitalized. And then add to that the level of artistry or expression that I'm bringing there, because I have been wanting to explore the story of the Selkie. And so I'll take my phone with me, I'm not looking at anything on my phone. Like that's a hard no, like, nope, we're not looking at Instagram or text or anything. I bring it because it's got my camera. And so I will position it in certain ways. And I'm like, how do I capture the water over my body? And it is such a wonderful exploration of like visuals and lighting. And then, I mean, mostly I play with it with filters because I don't have natural light in my bathroom. So it looks terrible. But that's the whole point, is like, I'm looking for lines. I'm looking for shapes. I'm looking for patterns. I'm looking for curves. And so just, I will just sit there and like take these pictures and see what I can capture. And then later I'll play with them in editing software and see what I can do. And I'm making an art project out of this. And it's just taking that to another level of just not just what it feels like. What does this look like? What can I create out of this? And it just makes me so happy.
Yeah. And you know, for me, when I'm in a bath, like there's just something about being held, you know, like, and I really experienced this in a really big way when I had my babies, because I had both of my boys in water. They were water births. And I honestly don't think that I could have had those babies had I not had the support of water, right? Both from you know, there was the spiritual aspect of it, but the water just has this beautiful way, as we all know who've been in water, which is everybody, of taking the weight off of you.
Yes.
You know, and I think that there's just something so visceral and tangible when you're in the water about all the heaviness of life, like just being taken from you for a while, right? And especially for those of us who really desire and need touch, right? I also feel like the bath is a place that you can get the sensation of being touched without another human being present for that.
Yes.
Right. So like when you're in water can feel like a hug. It can feel like somebody touching you, right? Like when you're swaying back and forth, the water is kind of providing that feeling in some way, right? And it also is like, how more vulnerable could you be?
Oh yeah.
You know, other than, well, I can think of a couple other ways, but you know, alone, vulnerable, right? Like, and of course we all come from water.
Yeah.
Right. We were all in water for quite a long time when we were being grown in our mother's bodies. And I think there's something just really nicely fundamental about that, you know, getting back into that water space for rest.
Yes.
Okay, let's go, because you're a sex writer. Let's go here. Are you ready to go here?
I'm ready. I think I know where you're going.
Do you? I hope so. So tell me about the role that masturbation plays in your rest story. Not the rest story, not the actual story on Medium, but just your rest protocols. Okay.
Yes. Okay. I have become very passionate about this aspect of life. It's very important, everyone.
Me too, right there.
It is so sad to me to think about how long it took me to get to that space, because I've really only been in it for like 3 years Before that, it was like something that I still struggled with a lot of shame around. And a part of me was always thinking that like one day I will not need to do this anymore, as if it was something that I shouldn't be doing. Like it was just too indulgent and too wrong. And I don't know what it was that really shifted it other than constant, diligent self-examination of like, why do I feel this way? If I enjoy this, what's the problem? You know? And I feel like over the course of years of me asking those questions, I finally got to a space of saying, this is no different than actual sex. And we all recognize finally that sex is part of self-care and like it can be a restful experience or like a nourishing experience in that way. If you are single, does that condemn you to not being able to engage in that? And that was the part of me that I feel like really fired me up, because I have a little bit, like I can be a little rebellious about stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, hell no, I'm going to enjoy that as well. And this is how I can do it by myself. And so through that exploration, I started paying attention to my cycles with it, because it does very much follow my creative cycles and my menstrual cycle. You know, like there are certain times when I indulge more than normal just because of those ups and downs.
Yeah.
And basically my theory around it at this point has been, every time you get the urge, go for it. Because I really feel like it is so invigorating and healthy for your body. It gives you so much. I want to say it gives you so much energy, but I don't mean that in the way that, oh, we need to have more energy to produce more. I just mean like to fill up our well. Like that's the kind of energy I'm talking about, not to go spend it on something, but to be like, oh, I can create more energy within myself and hold it here in this practice.
Mm-hmm.
And so I am very, very committed to, and I'm talking about like, and this is a luxury that I have as a freelancer, but like when it comes up for me, and it is very closely married to my creativity, so it can happen a lot when I'm working, I'm like, oop, taking a break and we're doing this, because if you don't, you'll miss the window. You know what I mean? Like an hour later, you'll be like, I'm not in the mood anymore. And so I really try to follow that urge and just go with it. And I'm not saying that's possible all the time. I mean, I'm probably 50 to 60% on that, but that's the intention behind it, is to really follow that, because I believe in the restorative nature of that practice, and that it's so important, regardless of what kind of relationship you are in or not in. It doesn't matter if you're single. I'm not saying this as a single woman. I'm saying this for all of us. Like, let's do this. Like, give yourself that energy and that love.
The masturbation revolt.
Yes.
We are all gonna. I was just thinking, like, of all those people that have quit their jobs, are they at home masturbating now too? Because that would be awesome, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was reflecting after a session with myself recently about like just is there any other time, and this is after sex too, any kind of sexual, whether it's sex with yourself or sex with a partner, when you're done, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the level of relaxation, of tiredness, of just deep release is so amazing,
Mm-hmm.
and I was having that moment after a session, if you will, and I was just reflecting. I was really in my body, and I was reflecting on like, I am so 100% completely relaxed.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. and my mind was cleared. Like, I wasn't thinking about anything else. My body was in this deep, heavy slumber fall, like when you're ready to just sleep, right? And be at rest, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this goes back to the conversation that we've had, and I'm going to write the article, but about all of the wonderful properties and wonderful roles for sex in our life, right?
Yeah.
Like, we've got very small lists in a small box right now currently in the general culture about what sex is for, but I think sex has a really beautiful role to play in rest.
Oh
right?
yeah.
This just, and again, sex with yourself or sex with a partner.
Yeah.
And yes, all the single people out there don't need to not experience this because we don't have a partner to experience it
Yes.
with, right?
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, rest again is rest is the ultimate form of self-worth and
Mm-hmm.
self-care, right?
Yeah.
People just taking back their desire to love themselves, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
When the other funny thing that what happened with this topic was we put it in January and it wasn't intentional,
Oh, really?
right?
I thought that
It
was.
wasn't. No,
Oh
it
my
wasn't
God.
intentional.
Wow.
It was not intentional, but it was one of those magically unintentional moments, right? Where we
Yeah.
realized oh, hey,
Yeah.
this is also a really good topic to be talking about in January.
Oh yeah.
And you and I have talked a lot about when we were approaching January, um, how we were going to live our January differently than previous Januaries,
Yeah.
right? And
Mhm.
um, so let's dive in a little bit on that. What's your January been like this year, and how have you intentionally made it different?
I just started really diving into this for the first time this year. And it was hard, again, hard because it comes with a lot of shame and a lot of guilt. And one of the things that about, I come off the holiday, I'm exhausted. And also like there's something about this time of year that I very much feel exposed, like hyper exposed. I don't know if it's just because it's like the dead of winter. I mean, this is midwinter, and I want to be like in my little hole, like I feel very biologically connected to that space where it's dark, it's cold, you just hibernate. I don't mean that literally, just like emotionally, everything else I feel spent. And so it's like I need to save my energy. And so here we have this big holiday buildup. And then right after that, in my family, I have um, a nephew and two nieces who have birthdays right after Christmas. And then of course there's New Year's, there's all the like, what do I do with my, like, now that we're in a pandemic, how do I see my dad? And then how do I see my, like, I can't see all my family members because I'd have to quarantine in between. And then it's like, but I can't do that. There's not enough time. And so it comes with so much stress for me. And this year was the first year that I said, I'm not going to the kid's birthday party. I'm not going to go see my dad. I'll see him later. We'll celebrate later. I just said it. Like I just texted everybody and I'm like, here's what I'm doing. I'm going to stay at my mom's and I'm going to, like, she lives out in the country. So I'm going to have a little retreat for a couple of days or a couple of weeks and just stay there.
It was supposed to be a couple
And
days, but then it
it
went.
was supposed to be a couple of days. Yeah. So I kind of jumped the gun on that. And that was for next year, but then
Well,
I
I think that
started.
was really that in itself was like kind of a profound moment,
Yes.
where you had given yourself a couple of days and then you extended that into
Yeah.
a couple of weeks
Yeah.
because that's what you needed, right?
Right.
And just saying like, nope, I think I'm going to keep going here. This is feeling
Yes.
good. This is feeling right. Like I don't need to move
Hmm.
on.
Right. And I had my work. So it's not like, I want to be clear, like, this isn't like a total rest time. Like I'm still working. I freelance. So I have my work with me, but I needed to cut down all of that other stuff that was taking energy from me. And I just did it. Like I was like, I'm not going to discuss this. I didn't say this, but that was my tone. I'm like, this isn't up for discussion or argument. I'm just doing it and I'm not going to explain it or anything. And it felt really good. And then the other challenge that I'm having right now is that, first of all, I happen to have something come up like this relaunch where it's like, okay, this is happening in January. I didn't intentionally do that. It just kind of happened. But I'm going with it. But it has been it required a lot of work. And so here I am, the last half of January has been really hardcore work and really, like, I'm really struggling to find ways to take breaks and also to balance all of these family commitments and social commitments. And so in some ways I feel like, oh my God, I'm back in that space again. How did this happen? Like I had such a good intention the first half of the month. And so I'm trying to figure out how I want to, um, create something different for next year. And even, it's not even about just next year. It's like, what about February? You know, I'm not going to feel significantly different in February. Like I will slowly morph into a more energetic person by summertime, sure.
Well, I mean, I'm with you because like I've been feeling super creative, and I think
Yes.
almost like the choice to kind of divest myself of putting energy into things that I really don't want to do
Yeah.
and making a commitment to that in this rest space, right,
Mm-hmm.
has also had the side effect of opening up way more creative energy for me than I was
Uh-huh.
expecting to have at this time, right?
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
um so I've been really trying to like honor that a little bit,
Mhm.
and it's kind of begs the question, is there rest in activity? Is the act
Mm.
of being creative something that is actually restful? Because
Yeah.
I don't feel um I don't necessarily feel like the stuff that like I started a practice, I've committed to a practice of tarot every day because I want to learn this modality, and I'm just interested in it. And there's something that's really comforting and for me restful about doing something every day,
Mhm.
right? And I have gotten away from that because, of course, when you're over busy, you're
Mhm.
just doing 50,000 things all the time,
Yeah.
right? And there's really not a whole lot of like disciplined action in your life because you're just, you're putting the fire out here, you're doing this, you're doing that.
Mhm.
And so I took on a couple things, this tarot reading stuff, and then also the whole 30 journey that I'm on, with my food intake. And um, I have found like those two things have provided a really nice space of respite in my crazy mind, right?
Mhm.
Like, I feel like I'm relying on them just like I would rely on a nap, or I might
Yeah.
rely on a, afternoon jack off every day, or, like,
Yeah.
right. Like I feel myself like sinking in really nicely to these ritual spaces where I'm doing the same thing, but it is activity.
Mhm.
And it is like, with the tarot stuff, it's study. I'm getting into books, I'm reading about it, I'm doing exercises with it every
Yeah.
day. You know what I mean? So it's not
Mhm.
like I'm just here, I'm
Right.
not doing the like deep breath work meditation thing,
Mhm.
but I do, and it's making me wonder, like, okay, well, maybe some of these, maybe there is some type of rest of some sort within activity.
Mhm.
I don't know. What do you think about that?
I absolutely do believe that the process of creativity, I think that it is, let's put it this way, I for sure think it is rejuvenating, like it is self-sustaining, it creates its own energy. I remember when I was at that job where I was working all the time, I would stay up late. I'd come home and stay up late writing because I was working on my novel. And that
On top of
many,
everything else, you were working on your novel?
oh yeah, yeah, of course. I'm always writing. But I remember feeling like that was just as restful to me as going to bed.
Mhm.
And I still feel like sitting here working on this relaunch, most of what I'm doing is so energizing to me and so nourishing to me. And it makes me so happy. If you took out all of my client obligations right now and all of my family obligations right now, which are like the big sources of stress in my life, I
Mhm.
feel like I could be working on this relaunch and it would be mostly rest to me, like the
Yeah.
way that my body is processing it, because I really feel nourished by creativity. And I think in the best of its expression, that's what it does for us. So I totally think that is possible. You know, there is a point I think where we can like take it too far or
Yeah.
work too hard, or I think really a lot of it is just when we're in the space of joy with it. Because I think sometimes we turn it into productivity. If we're in the space of like the joy and the experience of it, that's where it's really restful.
Yeah. And I think when you're doing something that is bringing you joy, right? Um, there is that natural balance of give and take.
Yeah.
Whereas like when you're doing something that you don't enjoy, that you just have to do because
Yes.
you need to put, you need to get the bills paid or whatever you're doing it for, right? If you
Yeah.
don't really want to be doing it, if it's not something that is you're in alignment, your joy is in alignment with, then it is more taxing. It's more
Mm.
tiring.
Mhm.
It's harder to get through,
Yeah.
because there isn't that kind of like give and take
Mhm.
with the action,
Yeah.
right? So and I think a lot of people are also they're getting into that too. They're realizing that like yeah, I'm not going to run back into the work world until I find something that is actually going to feed my soul
Mhm.
as well as my pocketbook.
Yes. Exactly.
Because, especially if you're working, a crap ton of hours,
Mhm.
right? Like
Yeah.
I could look at sometimes when I get into spaces, and these are all of my own making, honestly, right? Because I have been a self-employed person my entire life, my entire adult life. And so you know, I have the ability to control my time and what
Mm.
I say yes to and what I don't for the most part. And so but when I do find myself like balls to the wall, which honestly I am right now, um, it makes a big difference that these are all things that I really want to be working on.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like
Exactly.
that I really am like excited about them
Mhm.
and they make me happy and
Yeah.
they're like feeding my intellect, my soul. I'm meeting new people, all of those things.
Mhm.
That being said, I do have to sometimes call my shit. My question to you is how do you call your own shit?
Mm. Terrible at
Like
that.
what are the triggers that you see in your life or in your body or whatever that say like you're pushing too hard? Because I think this is really, really important for everybody to understand when they have gotten to a point. Because again, even if you change your life into a space where you're doing everything that you want to be doing and
Mhm.
you know um, you're hustling for what you want to be hustling for, not what somebody else wants you to be hustling for, right?
Yeah.
When you still can really get into a bad space with that,
Oh, yeah.
you can screw yourself over there. So
Mhm.
what type of things come to you when you know that you're not in a super balanced place?
I definitely think that there are patterns that I notice with my sleeping. If I'm not taking care of my sleep, which I am horrible about in general. And so that's a tough one. And I definitely notice like, okay, sometimes I'm staying up late because I'm feeling the creativity, but sometimes it's because I'm just like, I don't have any boundaries around that for myself. I'm just used to that. I've always stayed up late to work because I've been told that's what you're supposed to do.
Right.
And so that's an indicator for me if I'm consistently tired after a few weeks and I start looking at my sleep patterns and like, oh, I'm going to bed at like 1 a.m. This isn't how I should be doing things. And this is a hard balance for me to strike because I do tend to be very creative at night. Like I am a night owl. I can write, like I'll get on my computer and be like,
You're a
oh,
night wolf.
yes, totally. So it's hard. Sometimes it's hard for me to make that distinction, but really it comes with that nagging sense of fatigue. Like, why am I this tired?
Hmm.
Um, and then another one is I will feel very unsettled with myself, like a lot of inner anxiety where I feel like normally I wouldn't have that much. Like I'm always anxious, but I mean, there's a sense of it where in a circumstance where I wouldn't be anxious, I just constantly feel this like churning
Hmm.
feeling.
Right.
And even like the sense of another obligation makes me feel like I'm going to be pushed over the edge, like that feeling of like, oh, this is the edge for me. This is it. I can't handle it anymore. Like I remember in my 20s, I would have these, I don't know how to describe, like meltdowns, basically like a meltdown. And like someone would ask me something and I'd hang up the phone and I'd just fall on the floor and cry. It's like, it was violent, but like by myself and like
Right.
despair violent, not like destroying things violent. And I feel myself getting close to those edges sometimes. And it's like, uh-oh, what's going on here? Like, how many times have I said yes that is causing me to feel so stretched out that I am about to tip over?
Yeah.
Because I know it's coming. And so those are some big feelings that come up for me. That's like, uh-oh, something's wrong here. I need to cut something out.
Yes. I have a lot of those too. I had one last night because we had a big seedlings event, and I went to sleep, and then I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and all I could think about was all the shit I have to do.
Oh, yeah.
And that's one of the triggers for me is like,
Mm,
it's not that I'm waking up in the middle of the night, but when I wake up and when I can't get back to sleep because I've got the list, I got the list
mhm.
in my head, which also means that like, I need to get it out of my head and on some paper,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
That's one of the things that I have to do when I get that trigger.
Yeah.
Um, Another trigger that I've noted over this last month, because I've been doing the Whole 30, is when I am not making myself food, when I
Mhm.
don't have
Oh,
enough
yeah.
time to
Mhm.
actually prepare food for my body,
Yeah.
I am out of balance severely,
Yes.
right? So
Mhm.
if I'm relying too much on takeout, all the things,
Mhm.
I know like nada,
Yeah.
this is
That's
not,
a good one.
this is a bad space.
Mhm.
Also, funny enough, my laundry is a really good partner in this, right? Because
Mhm.
I don't like to do laundry in
Yeah.
general. Like I don't mind putting it in. I don't mind getting it in the dryer, but folding for me is like ugh, right? So if I'm getting backed up to like 3 baskets of laundry,
Oh, yeah.
I know I'm like beyond procrastination and I'm just too busy to get that done because
Yeah.
I'll just that it will always go to the bottom of the list,
Mhm.
right? And so if it's at the bottom of the list to the point of being like 3 baskets in,
Yeah.
time to take a look at it, right?
Oh,
Time
yeah.
to take a look
Mhm.
at it. But I
Definitely.
think it is really important for us all to like identify like what are those things that we can look like because you get going,
Mhm.
and you're not seeing it
Mhm.
until you're way in over your head,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And
Mhm.
unless you identify some of these things that you can look at and say like, oh nope, when that happens, when I'm observing that
Yeah.
in my life, I know I'm in over my head, and
Mhm.
I need to pull back, and I need to say, So when you do come to that point where you're like, hey, okay, I need to pull back,
Mhm.
what are some of the first things that you start to do?
I will not respond to certain things in as timely as I normally would. So like if a phone call comes in from my dad and I know like this is a big guilt trigger for me to even admit to this, let alone to be doing it. But like a lot of times I'm like, I can't handle that right now. And so I won't answer the phone. And or if he wants me to come visit in a week, I'm like, I'll do my best to do that, but it'll probably be like 10 days or you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
setting up those boundaries, like the requests from people that I have in my life that are around things that are very highly stressful for me. Those are the things that I'm like, I don't want to deal with that right now. I can't handle it right now. I don't have the energy. Or even just a catching up with a friend and having them text me at like 8 o'clock at night and saying, do you have time to talk tonight so we can catch up? Like if it's not an urgent thing, I'm like, no. Like I need a plan, like I need more notice than that for right now. Like sometimes I'll say yes when I'm feeling the energy, but tonight, no, I don't have the energy. And just getting used to even saying that is so hard for me, or to have those boundaries is so hard for me. But that's a big thing. Like I give so much to those people and situations that when I have too many of them on my plate, I can't do it. I just like that's what pushes me over the edge. And so those are the things that I cut first.
Yeah, one of the things I do is again make the list because if it
Mhm.
sticks in my mind and I'm having to manage it in my mind instead of on some paper, it gets
Yeah.
really hairy. But the other thing a list helps me do is like prioritize or just start scratching some shit off. Like, do I
Yes.
really need to do this?
Mhm.
Or who else do I know in my world that actually I could offload this to, or I should be delegating it to, that I'm taking on for somebody else that I don't need to be doing.
Mhm.
I think when you see it on paper, it's different,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Um, And you can be like, yeah, I don't really need to be doing that.
Yeah. Oh, totally. I love my little day planner because I love the tangibility of writing things down. Like I don't do phone calendars. Like it's just not satisfying.
Yeah.
So if I can sit there and write this stuff down and then I'm like, I write it in pencil. So then I can erase the stuff that I'm like, oh, why is this on my list? And then when I do something, I can cross it out. And it's like, yes, it just feels so good.
Yeah. You know, the other thing that I like to do is really just stay with my day, right?
Mhm.
Like one of the things that I feel like we get overwhelmed on or we get ourselves in trouble with is when we start thinking or planning or doing things that are months out, you know, and some things do
Yes.
need to be happening months out. Um, but again, we're all in this mindset that everything has to be perfectly done,
Mhm.
you know, and you know, if you want to get the XYZ results, you need to be getting, you need to be doing it XYZ way, right?
Mhm. Yep.
And I will often just have to like slow it down and just be like, the only thing in front of me is today.
Yeah.
Like, who knows what's going to happen in 2 months anyway? There could be a pandemic or something.
Right. Exactly. You never
Right.
know.
And actually, the pandemic really taught me that again. It
Yeah.
did, because like every time I would try to make some plans, I mean, something would
Oh,
happen. And
yeah.
it's still, actually, that's still happening.
Yep.
You know, every time I would try to live outside of my present moment.
Mhm.
And this is one of the things I think is so beautiful about the pandemic is like, nope, actually, you can't live outside of your present moment. You need to get right
Yes.
back in your present moment and stay there, because that's actually how you should be living. Right.
Yes.
And
Mhm.
I'm going to make it that way. Right. I'm going to
Right.
just mess you up there, you know?
Mhm.
So I like kind of just, mm, you know, bringing it down to that present day.
Mhm.
The other thing that I like to remind myself is, and I've done this like my whole life, because I'm not in any line of work that is a life or death situation.
Mhm.
But I oftentimes will tell myself, like, you know, if you don't get that email out today, nobody's going to die.
Right.
You know, this isn't going to massively negatively impact somebody
Yeah.
if you don't do this today, right?
Right. Mhm.
Um, is there anything on your list that is going to massively impact somebody that you care about? If there is, then pull it up to the top
Yeah.
and just take care of it. And then all the other stuff that is not going to be a massive impact, it's okay to let it ride.
Mhm.
You know, you'll get to it
Yep.
sometime, right?
Absolutely.
Or you
That is
won't.
so good.
And then it wasn't really actually as important as you were making it.
Oh, yeah.
You know
Mhm.
what I mean? So
Yeah.
some of those strategies kind of help me open up my rest room, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
My rest room.
Sounds hilarious.
My rest space. How's that? Not my
There we
rest
go.
room.
We all need one of those too, so it's
Dude, and
okay.
then my mind just went into a super crazy place after I put that together. You know, with I'm not going to
Oh,
go
yeah.
there. I know you already know where I'm
Oh,
going.
yeah.
Just leave it there. Okay. All right. Well, we've got about an hour on the dock here, so I'm going to close our conversation today. This has been so wonderful. We hope to have Yael back later this year. There is going to be a whole sex month, so woo.
Hello.
Yeah, there's going to be lots of opportunities to talk. And thank you so much for taking some time with us today, supporting Pollinate the way that you do. Um, for all of you that are engaged with the Pollinate Women's Weekend, Yael is planning a trip out here in the spring to bring her camera and her ritual and all her beauty to the Pollinate Women's Weekend in the spring, which is May 19th through the 22nd this year. So um, I love you, soul,
Thank you.
soul sister. And
Thank you so much.
thanks again. All right. We'll talk soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.